I am really honored to be here to worship with you this morning. It's such a privilege to meet my sisters and brothers across town and to participate with you. And I've never done a back-to-back service before, so whatever happens might not be the same that happens in the next hour. Pray for me. I have a story here that I wanted to share with you from a woman wrote that had gone through some horrible times, and she shared what it felt like to be in a very troubling marriage. She said, one of the most common things we hear in ministry from women experiencing abuse is, I don't even know if my relationship is abusive. I'm just confused. Confusion is not accidental. It's one of the abuser's most powerful tools. From the outside, he may look extraordinary, attentive, spiritual, devoted. He speaks affection over you. He encourages you publicly. Friends might tell you how lucky you are to have a husband like him. What they don't see is what happens behind closed doors. There may be no bruises, no broken furniture, no visible rage. Instead, it's emotional and psychological erosion, subtle, calculated, relentless. It seeps into your life quietly. You begin to question yourself. You feel unsettled, small, off balance. You can't quite explain why you feel you're shrinking inside your own home. He crosses boundaries that you've clearly communicated. When you gently express discomfort, he reverses it. Now he's the wounded one. Now he's crying. Now you're harsh. You're selfish. You're withholding. Why don't you love me the way I deserve, he asks. I've never felt so unloved. And suddenly you're defending yourself for something you can't even name. Over time, you stop bringing up concerns, not because they aren't valid, but because every time you do, you end up feeling guilty over having them. You begin to doubt your own instincts. You question whether your feelings are too much, too dramatic, or too ungrateful. What's happening is not confusion. It's control. Your reality is slowly being reframed. Your confidence is being dismantled. The kindness he shows you becomes leverage, proof that you're the problem. The spiritual language becomes pressure. The expectations become impossible to meet. You're not too sensitive. You're not failing as a wife. You're not responding you are responding to invalidation. When your concerns are repeatedly dismissed or turned against you, of course you begin to feel like you're breaking, because something inside of you is. Friend, this feels familiar, then hear this clearly. You are not crazy. You are not imagining it. And you are deeply seen and known by God, even if others cannot see what's happening. The sad reality is that abuse happens very frequently among God's people. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around that God's people, both men and women, develop patterns of control over a period of time that negate the personhood of the other. It's not a relationship with someone. It's power over someone. And I must confess that I, for many, many, many years, was never aware that this was happening. But when Paul wrote that there are wolves among the flock, as he told the church in Ephesus, wolves will come in and will not spare the flock. And they are in sheep's clothing. It's here. It's all around us. That this desire to control another person. And yet, Jesus said he came to set us free. He came to open the prison doors. And prison doors, so many times, I've heard women talk about their abusive situations feeling like being in prison. And it's just amazing. I can't really understand how demeaning and how oppressive this really is to live with. I would like to tell you about a couple women that I've met in the past couple years. This one friend of mine lives right here in Mount Holly, and I met her when I worked at a bank some years ago. She came up to the tower line, and she looked really troubled. And I just reached out to her and said, can I help? What's going on? And she said, I'm just having some trouble with marriage, and I just learned some things. She'd been married for quite a few years, 2 children, grown. And it turned out that she had just discovered that her husband was living a double life, that the kind of things he was involved in are things that are usually promoted on that TV show, Special Victims Unit. If you've ever seen that, it's just some really bizarre things. Well, I'm still very good friends with this woman, and she lives here, and it's hard to really understand all of her story because it's so patchwork. But she has just this year finally gotten a decision from the judge. 9 years she has been going through litigation abuse after the separation from her abuser, where he would continually drag her to court, continually forcing her to have more and more bills, legal bills. They're unbelievable. She's incredibly in debt. She is suffering from many health issues that were caused by the physical and the emotional abuse that she experienced. He often threatened death. He beat her up many times. So one of the things that I've learned is that trauma brain, as it's officially called, a lot of women people that have been in that kind of trauma, they can't put a consecutive timeline together in their conversation. They'll talk about an event, and they'll talk about another event, and they might be completely disconnected. So it's really hard when you're asking somebody's story to really see things in a sequential time frame like I'm used to thinking of. Another woman that I've met about a year ago, she also lives here in Mount Holly. She shared with me that she spent a number of years in South Carolina, I believe it was. Her abuser was really good friends with the police department. And, it was the good old boys routine back there, and for some reason, she was never allowed to leave the house for years. The farthest she could go was the front porch, and one time she said she stepped off the front porch and there was a patrol car coming by and saying, "Back inside." When she was finally able to escape, she went to a DV shelter, but she was only there one night when they said, "Your son is just past the age limit for boys in the shelter." So she ended up spending 6 months living in a shed, getting a job and working to support her 2 children until she was able to move on. She's still suffering a great deal of trauma now that she's been out for many, many years, and her kids are grown. She has grandchildren, but she still suffers greatly from the trauma she experienced. So these are your neighbors. These are right here in town. I didn't know that I had a neighbor right beside me some years ago who, she was kind of weird. She had some health problems, and I couldn't quite, she was, I would talk with her, and she was coming to our church, but it was just, she's just paranoid. I thought, what's wrong with this woman? She's really paranoid. She's just fearful of everything. And she told me a couple of things that had happened to her, like sexual abuse by a very high-ranking politician, and she was really fearful for her life, and she was always, wiretapping was something that she was constantly paranoid about. And so, yeah, there's just so much evil in the world. And yet, God is still speaking to us. And so a couple years ago, I began to feel this nudging about providing some housing, because I found out that women that are trying to get out of abuse don't have a place to live. And a woman called me and asked for a place if I had an apartment available, and I said no, and she said, but I'm living in a hotel. I've been here for 5 months, and I can't find a job because I don't have an address. And I can't get an address because I don't have a job. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. When I hung up, I asked my husband, can we buy another house so we can house women? And he said, no. I said, let's just look into it. And the Lord just kept leading and kept prompting and kept pushing. And everywhere everybody we talked to, more doors opened. And I spoke to the director of the domestic violence shelter here in town, in Carlisle, which I didn't even know we had. And she said to me, Laurie, this is what happens. We pick up women who they've been beaten, they've been in a life-threatening situation. We meet them at a gas station in the middle of the night. They come with a child with nothing but a little bag. And we can keep them in the shelter for a month, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months if they're really starting to make some progress. But there's no place that they can afford to live. They've been financially abused. They've been isolated. Many times these women, after a couple months out, they begin to convince themselves that their abuser has changed his mind. He realizes that, I'm serious and he really needs to start treating me better. He's learned his lesson, and they go back. And then it's a lot worse because his power and control was threatened, and he will do even worse things. The abuse accelerates. And so she said, and I told her what I wanted to do, and she said, Laurie, I have prayed for something like this. We need transitional housing desperately. I was like, oh, there's a name for this? Oh, wow. Boy, was I learning. And then the Lord led me to Called to Peace Ministry, which does the Protect the Flock seminars, and I began to get training from them in what abuse looks like and how they are ministering to survivors of abuse, and what happens in the brain when someone has been under such traumatic stress for years and years. What happens physically in the body. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and how physical ailments, autoimmune diseases develop over time with extensive trauma. So here we are at a point now, after 4 years of God just nudging and nudging and nudging me into this sphere, that many of you saw the diagram out there. We have a building that was donated to us by Rob Fry, the George's Flowers building. We've been working within the perimeters of a $4 million project to renovate that building, and it's going to be able to house up to 10 families that have come out of domestic abuse. And it's going to have 4 kitchens so that they're not bumping up against each other, and 6 bathrooms and a lot of shared space. It's going to be a beautiful building. And funny thing is, I just found out this past week that the most important part of the renovations is the security system, and it didn't get into the budget for some reason. So So yesterday, I'm working on writing a grant for the high-level security system, cameras that we have to have all over the place. And so he's starting to initiate, if I have to find out this coming week, what's the budget for a security system that we need? It's probably going to be around 50 grand or something like that. So, so there we are. I'm working outside of our reconstruction budget to find the funding for what's actually the most important feature of this property. So there you go. I'm not sure how much time I've got to speak today, probably only a few minutes, but I'd really like to find out what questions you have and address those at this point. And is there anything that you'd like to ask me about abuse or about the building, about the construction schedule, or anything else? It's a very, very open and friendly and talkative church, so I know you have. Yes, ma'am.
What will be your criteria for who's able to come there?
Oh, what a great question. What a great question. I found out that to get into the domestic violence shelter, you have to be in a lethal situation. But that's only a small percentage of the women that are experiencing huge traumatic stress and emotional abuse. So what is the criteria? I'm trusting that the Lord is going to send me some very wise program directors that are going to really be able to minister in that area and discern what is really needed, because there are some women that have experienced abuse that have an attitude of, all right, I've suffered, you owe it to me, and I'm just going to kind of sit in a shelter and just live here for a while and not do anything. But the things that we need to really look for are women that are coming with the heart to change, to grow, to develop. And one thing that's critical in this, and why we are not seeking government funding to run this program, we're seeking private funding, is because we believe that the Bible is foundational for heart change. You can see the logo says healing hearts, healing lives. It's coming from a changed heart that a life is really transformed. And so the criteria, I would say, would have to be a willingness to go through the hard work of healing the way we think, the way she thinks, the way she has learned to operate from the trauma, and to allow the Word of God to transform her mind from within so that she can prove that God is who He says He is. Speaking of that, I always just want a word of encouragement to you, that I'm reminded that some of you might be thinking, okay, I'm at the latter days of my life. I'm 72, and John and I had just entered retirement when the Lord started nudging us in this direction. And I know that you're familiar with this. God chooses what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chooses what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chooses what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. And because of Him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us the wisdom of God, righteousness, and sanctification and redemption, so that it is written, let no one who boasts boast in the Lord. So many people have said to me, oh, you're doing such a great thing. I got to tell you, it's not me. This is the Lord's work from the very beginning. This is His process that He's allowing us to walk through, and it's His glory as people come to Hope House, find salvation, find that they are worthy of being loved, that they really do belong to the daughter. They are daughters of the King. They have value, infinite value, and they are loved. And that's what we want to be able to communicate to the women that come to live at Hope House. Any other thoughts? No? Here you go. Pastor Dan.
One question.
Yeah.
Muted. One question here. So you shared about how these women were around you and you didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Right? So we're in this place where we don't see it and we don't recognize it as abuse, but then also themselves, right? They don't always know that their marriage or their relationship is an abusive one.
Exactly.
So do you have any resources off the top of your head?
Thank you so much for asking that,
That you
because
can recommend?
actually out there on the table, I have a few cards that Call to Peace put together that takes them to their website where there's a little questionnaire where you can say, you know, there's something troubling me at home, and I really can't put my finger on it. It's just a little questionnaire to see if that kind of brings something to your attention that you can say, is this abuse? The woman that started Call to Peace Ministries was in abuse for 23 years and would not call it abuse. She just said, I'm in a troubled marriage. They're also out there on the table that you're welcome to take is called the Power and Control Wheel. This helps women identify what abuse looks like. And it's divided up into a number of categories, and there's all kinds of descriptions. So if you know somebody that you might want to think about or might want to open a conversation with about their troubled marriage or some problems they might be experiencing at home, hand them one of those power and control wheels and ask them, is this anything you're experiencing? Thank you.
Thank you.
so much.
Jay has a question.
Yeah.
Just kind of curious about the distance of your outreach. You're in Carlisle now, you just talked about some ladies in Mount Holly. And so the question is how big is your coverage? And where I'm going with that is there's going to be kids brought into the picture, and they're in school systems, so there's some logistics that might have to occur to get them back in their schools and stuff like that. So I just kind of wondering if you could just give me a little insight on that.
When the Lord gave me the name Hope House of Cumberland Valley, I didn't want to limit it to Cumberland County. It's Cumberland, there's a lot of need. And I don't know who God's going to bring to this. But the beautiful thing is, one block away, is it Hamilton Elementary School? It's right down the street. We're right next to the fire department. We can actually call on volunteers to stand out on the sidewalk as kids walk to school. So we don't know who people are going to bring to us, but they're all going to come through referral. I don't envision that we will actually be going out in the middle of the night and rescuing people from an abusive situation. That's what the DV shelter does. We don't want to step on what they do so well and have experience with, but we work in collaboration with the DV shelter, the Salvation Army, with other churches, with the YWCA, to collaborate with them to be a next step from the women that they have rescued. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Pastor Dan, if there's nothing else.